We're moving our attention now. This is the third chapter of the story. I began with it this morning. We move into the question and the issues around the energy landscape and the policy surrounding that energy landscape. And are we on track? Are we getting there? And are there the big ticket policies that have been launched in the past, let's say, 3 years, especially in the past 12 months, going to make a difference, and are they going to have traction? So we've got a range of contributors who are going to help us think that through, if you will, in the next hour, basically. I have Pierre. Pierre, from you've been involved in the launch of REPowerEU, and obviously people saw that as a real opportunity to create the right signal to investors and others and communities that renewable energy matters, okay? What's your sense of how do we increase the share of renewable resources and energy more widely in Europe? And I suppose in the context of the last discussion, which I know that you weren't able to be at, but that whole dimension of citizens and making sure that we don't lose them along the way. Over to you, Pierre.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for accepting me as a replacement to Dieter Juhl-Jørgensen, the Director-General of DG Energy, who would have liked to be here, but unfortunately had conflicting issues and had to jump into other events and negotiations. Well, as you say, REPower was very much about two things, two real dimensions. The first one was, of course, diversifying our gas imports. That was very obvious. So the very conscious policy, which I think we can say now has been hugely successful, of getting rid of our dependence of Russian gas. Russian oil as well, by the way. We are hardly importing any Russian oil at all anymore. There are some limited derogations in Central Europe. And in terms of gas, we are now down from 50% to 7 or 8% of our pipeline gas coming from Russia. That was one dimension. But the other dimension is, as you say, was on one hand, was the whole speeding up of the energy transition dimension. And that was there was one element which was saving energy. Also now we have the first results, and I think we've been successful. So we reduced our gas consumption by 18% between August and April of this winter, and then speeding up renewables. A link to that, and I think that is an interesting dimension, because I think many in the room would remember still a time where security of supply and energy transition were not necessarily the two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I remember very much debates in the Commission 10, 15 years ago, where people would say, the renewables, it's good. We like renewables, but we have to think about security of supply. And today, renewables is security of supply. And that is, I think, a strong shift in mentality. So we raised the level of ambition. We now have the Renewable Energy Directive nearly agreed, not officially agreed, but informally it is agreed. So 42.5% as a level of ambition to 2030. You know, I was in the team of Arias Cañete as his deputy head of cabinet when it was hugely contested whether we could go to 32% by 2030. And it's not such a long time ago. It's a couple of years ago. Today we find 42.5 realistic, but it's a high level of ambition. Let's be very honest, that it's nearly a doubling of the current share of renewables. And that in 8 years' time. So what are the main issues? I mean, you know that we've been working very much on permitting. It's not been an obvious issue to deal with at European level. It's actually quite recent that we are dealing with permitting at all at European level. It's very much seen as a national competence. Actually, in many member states, it's not even a national competence. It's a regional, local competence. You have constitutional issues in many member states without difficulty, including my own, Sweden. There's a big issue on what you can do in terms of permitting requirements. But clearly, it has been and still is one of the major bottlenecks. So we worked on that in the Renewable Energy Directive. We had the emergency measure. kicking in trying to address this trade-off between environmental protection, which of course is a legitimate aim and priority, with possibilities then to speed up permitting procedures. So working with issues such as renewable acceleration areas, go-to areas, trying to deal with some of these issues linked to environmental impact assessments and so forth. So that has clearly been one issue. The second has been, of course, what we're still working on is the reform of the electricity market.
Yeah.
So that's very much on the agenda this week as we speak, I dare say. And here, of course, also with the aim of speeding up the deployment, addressing the price signals and getting then greater reliance on long-term contracts for renewables. And then the third priority that we have has been very much the whole infrastructure dimension, the grid issue, which I think is really an issue that we need to address if we want to reach the renewable energy targets. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a welcome debate at European level. We haven't paid enough attention to the fact that the whole grid needs to adapt both on the supply and the consumer side.
Exactly. Yeah.
To a very strongly changing, if you want, energy generation, electricity generation context, and that if we don't address it, if we don't address that capacity, it risks becoming a major bottleneck for the energy transition. And I know on the personal level, I would add the fourth dimension, which I think is, again, difficult to address at European level, but needed to address at European level, at least as a push, and that is the whole skills agenda, the labor market, the qualification of our workforce in terms of being able to provide the competences, the knowledge that is needed for companies, for the energy system as a whole. But I think in terms of if you want day-to-day work, it's been very much permitting, infrastructure, electricity market, price signals, long-term stability.
Great. Pierre, thank you for being for stepping in so valiantly and effectively. I suppose I'm not going to ask you this question, but it's something to think about. You'd have thought that when you were doing, the policy on renewables and having to, create investment in, let's say, wind, etc., that permitting would have been an issue in your impact assessment right at the early stages. It shouldn't be something that would have been found out later. So that's a bit of a criticism, of course, on my part, because you'd have thought it would have been a policy impact assessment. Permitting is going to be a major issue when we're going to try and invest so much in renewables. I suppose my question, therefore, will follow, and I'll bring it back to the audience, is when you're thinking about the grid, let's think what are going to be the barriers to transition. We need that grid. We absolutely, to be competitive, Europe needs that grid to be connected, absolutely. So let's come back to that in a moment. But thank you very much. Claire, moving to you. Thank you for being with us. Good to see you again. ENGIE, big producer, you find yourself in this really interesting position right now. I wouldn't call it interesting, challenging situation when everything's about energy at the moment. What I'd find helpful, Claire, is for you to reflect on where you find yourself right now as a company in the context of this wider, energy policy landscape, and then go down into the grid issue, if you may, if I can ask you to go move into that conversation. Thank you. Good to see you.
Well, great to be back here, and this time in presence, not virtual. So it feels good to see real people, and indeed these are very interesting times, I would say, for energy. Well, we all underwent, and that was said before me by Pierre, we all underwent dramatic events last year. A dramatic conflict, first and foremost. And of course, it also had energy consequences. On the energy landscape, we had the shock of the war in Ukraine. We also had the shock of lower than expected availability of a number of means of production of electricity on the European market, in particular French nuclear and in particular hydrology. So a year where we were vastly impacted on the supply side. And nevertheless, as Pierre was saying, we collectively managed to face and to live up to this supply shock, negative shock. At the same time, we also all experienced very high prices. And this has been an issue, of course, for all customers, be they businesses, be they households. So yes, we've been able to manage supply. The prices have been very high. What does it tell us for the future? Well, I think what it puts front and center on the energy landscape is the importance both of security of supply, prices, and decarbonation. And I think by now, we should all have clearly in mind the fact that we need all these three to align to be successful in energy transition. And it's not a given. I mean, security of supply could have seemed a given beforehand, before the crisis. We've seen how tense security of supply can be. Prices, we were used to living with relatively low prices of energy, not anymore the case. And of course, the decarbonation issue more present than ever. And here we have to have in mind, just to give an order of magnitude, that in the next few years and until 2050, we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 4 times more rapidly than in the last decade. So what we have made some progress. What we need is to accelerate in a big way. So, and to accelerate in an affordable way, and that talks to the previous panel and the discussions on the citizen, and in a reliable way, ensuring security of supply. So where does this lead us? Well, several things. We are very convinced, and as you were remembering at ENGIE, we are a producer of different sources of energy. We have exited the gas production, but we are producer of biomethane, we are producer of renewable hydrogen, and we are producer of electricity, be it by PV, onshore wind, offshore wind. And of course, in Belgium, as a number of you are well aware, we are also producers of nuclear energy. So we are across the spectrum, and we are extremely convinced that in order to succeed the energy transition, we will need all the different types of energy. We shouldn't oppose one energy to another. So let me be a bit more precise and digging a bit into this. Well, first we need sobriety and efficiency, and that was said by Pierre. I think one of the good news of the energy crisis is that businesses and customers have proved that they can make some savings in energy. Mind you, some of it were good savings and productive savings, some were just demand destruction, factories shutting down, and this is the reverse of the medal, and not of course, a good news. What we want is energy efficiency, energy sobriety that does preserve the competitiveness and that does preserve the functioning of the European industry. But energy and sobriety is going to be a key component, of course, of energy transition. Second, very much agree, of course, with what was said before. We need to accelerate big way the production of renewables. That's very clear in all our scenarios. I mean, we're talking several folds. We're talking 3 to 4 times more in terms of wind by 2035. That's tomorrow. We're talking about 6 times more in terms of PV by 2035. This is tomorrow again. So we need to accelerate big time the deployment of renewables, and together with renewables that do contribute indeed to security of supply, we need to increase our flexibility means. We know that renewables are intermittent, so we will need ways to store and to displace the supply across time, not to be overly dependent on the time of production. So here I'm talking about batteries, I'm talking about steps, pumped hydro, of course, and also about CCGTs, which are gas-fired electricity production units with gas that will need to be decarbonized. We will need all the three, and we will need them to be available when needed to ensure a matching between supply and demand in terms of electricity. So a word here on market design, because that's a topical issue indeed.
It's almost the infrastructure we need, really. Yeah.
So, well, market design is the overall framework we do need as investors to have clear signals to be able to accelerate. So, indeed, the signals that will be provided will be key. We believe that, as a rule, the PPAs are a very good way to give, so PPA are long-term contracts between producers and consumers, and we believe that as a rule, they give very good visibility to both sides. As investors, we do need clarity about what will be the prices tomorrow, and the customers alike, they do like clarity, the businesses, and visibility. So PPA are a great tool between producers and customers to give visibility to both sides. We could have also CFDs, and they are hotly debated. Right now, I will not go into this unless there are specific questions. But we do need these long-term signals for, in particular, to accelerate our renewable production. We will need also a framework that recognizes the need for flexibility while ensuring the decarbonation, of course. And third thing, I would like to stress on market design, we will need a framework that strikes a balance, that finds a way, in a way, to ensure a sound supply market that does protect customers, but also allows for competition. So here we need to find this balance. So this is for electricity. I wouldn't be complete if I don't mention the last lever of decarbonation, which is gas. We are very convinced that for a number of uses, we will need gas in the energy transition, not fossil gas. We will need gas that will become decarbonized. What do I mean here? Two things mainly, biomethane and green hydrogen, or low carbon hydrogen. Again, big debate. Why do we need this? In two words, there are some sectors that are hard to abate, meaning if you only electrify, it's going to be either impossible or far too costly to the economy. And these are in particular sectors of some industrial uses, in particular the ones which rely on very high temperatures. So some industrial uses clearly will continue to need gas, and some heavy mobility uses will also need gas because electricity is simply not practical. And the batteries would be too big. In addition, and I think that's been also one of the lessons when we look at the availability of energy throughout the crisis, we are in a situation where a number of uses are going to be electrified. At the same time, there's a limit to the capacity we're able to put online. So we need to be sure that at each and every point of time, the supply and demand of electricity will match. In this context, the role of gas and the fact that for heating sectors in particular, gas still has a role to play, becoming more and more green throughout time, will be important. Why? Because in the heating sector, it's very simple. When it gets cold, you need more heating. That's very basic. So what does it mean? It means that overall, we all have the same needs at the same time, meaning that there are peak demands due to heating at the same time. If everything is electrified, you see that you need much more in terms of capacity. So gas is also a way to make it affordable, becoming green, and making sure you don't need this peak demand. And last, because you wanted me to talk about infrastructures, yes, indeed, we do see bottlenecks. And here I would very much echo what was just said. The two bottlenecks we mainly see are permitting across member states where we operate, and networks. We sometimes delay projects that we have in renewables by 1 year or 2 years because the connection to network cannot come earlier. So indeed, this is already, it's not the future, it's already becoming a bottleneck. So it's very good to make sure that throughout the years, and as we accelerate, we do accelerate also in the network industry. And this is also, by the way, one of the big costs, and let me finish like this, big costs of energy transition. We made our scenarios for Europe, and our estimates are that roughly it's going to be something like 40 billion euros that will need to be spent on the networks every year, electricity networks. Gas networks, much less, because they are already quite, I would say, quite dense. So order of magnitude, 40 billion euros a year for electricity networks, 6 billion a year for gas networks. So let's also be careful here to make sure that We electrify as much as is needed and reasonable, but we keep the gases for the uses where it could be cheaper.
As ever, Claire, really clear, pragmatic, and wise. You talk it as is, and what's great about what you're saying is that rather than kind of be hostage to the fortune of let's flick the switch overnight, we need to be pragmatic. We need to have the mix as we phase something in and phase something out, if you like. But your point made about the kind of the cost and the network issue are really well made, and I'm hoping that there is some focus politically on that. And on that point of politics, I'm going to turn to Cristian. Thank you for joining us. I know you've been busy, but so I'm really pleased that you'll be able to make this panel. Cristian, we need, you sit on the committee that's kind of key to this conversation. And I suppose as we aimed to decarbonize the power system, we know we need better storage solutions as well as capturing solutions. Tell us from your point of view, is the green hydrogen route the way to go, or what's the alternative? What's on your mind when we think about the implications of decarbonizing the system and what solutions we apply?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Well, on behalf of ITRE committee, I just need at the beginning to reaffirm the strong commitment that European Parliament in general and the ITRE committee in particular has to the decarbonization pathway, to the Green Deal strategic objective of European Union. Clearly, this was strongly supported from the beginning. It didn't diminish as political support after COVID-19, during COVID-19, even that, of course, it was a big debate at that moment. And then, of course, paradoxally in a way, the horrific aggression of Russia against Ukraine not only diminished the commitment of the political commitment to advance in deploying clean technologies, to advance in supporting hydrogen, in supporting renewables, but it became even stronger because REPowerEU is not just to phase out, to give up to the imports from Russia. In the same time, we can do this by increasing the role of renewables, by reducing the role of fossil fuels. And here, as I said, the commitment is very clear. On the other hand, of course, as the industry committee, sometimes we try to see what is really feasible and how to get a balance. We are a little bit less enthusiastic than ENVI or other, maybe with the plenary, and try to look a little bit how we can do the things properly, because our industries also needs decent prices for electricity, also our households, our citizens. But for industry is a big problem of competitivity, and not only the steel, the cement, the energy-intensive industries, but this touches also industries that maybe the electricity is not a big cost, but if the margins are very low or very strict, then of course the global competitivity is at stake. That's why we need to see things in a balanced way, and I totally agree that for a period we'll need gas. Also, it's a problem of security, of having electricity all the day, all night, all seasons. I'm coming from Romania, of course. We have the luck to have a lot of hydro, which is also in a way intermittent, but maybe less than solar and wind. And we accept and even want to develop even further the nuclear energy. But this is the case for just some member states. That's why clearly decarbonized gas, we fought to have it in the taxonomy, and hydrogen is extremely important. I also always say that without the use of hydrogen, it is very difficult to decarbonize some hard-to-abate industries, and we'll just see these industries going outside Europe. Until now, we experienced that in many senses. We reduced our emissions, but we exported these emissions because not all the continents followed our examples. We imported more with more emissions and less environmental standards. And this is something that we should also take into account when we take very, very abrupt decisions. On hydrogen, of course, green hydrogen is the one that we aim, and this is what we need to support strongly. But for the moment, it is not easy to have just green hydrogen. We need electricity from renewables. So this is clearly the way. But for many of the members of European Parliament and many of the member states, all kind of hydrogen is accepted. And important is to build the infrastructure. We are also extremely ambitious on hydrogen. For the moment, is still very marginal, only for some industrial processes. But with all the money that we are investing also in research and in scale up some projects, we'll see soon hydrogen being part of our mobility. At some point, of course, storage of energy. On electricity market design, this is the big issue that we are now debating in the Parliament. On 19th of July, we'll vote in the ITRE committee. Even this morning,
Yes.
the colleagues that have responsibilities, rapporteurs and shadows, with the technical teams of the political groups and their personal teams, try to advance in building the compromises. The two big novelties, let's say like this, beside of course empowering the consumer, the PPAs and the CFDs clearly are welcomed, are supported, but let's see also the details, because some member states and even some colleagues look to alternatives to CFDs, for instance. So let's see how the final compromises will look like, as we need the proper instruments to intervene when it's high volatility and clear speculation on the market. I'm a strong advocate to keep the energy internal market, the competitivity, the free movement. Clearly, this is something that we built with difficulty, and we cannot now come back to protectionism, to national markets. We need even to be more integrated, to build more interconnections, to use European money, companies' money, in order to be even more interconnected. But in the same time, when it's clear speculation, high volatility, we need some instruments to intervene, because otherwise we pay high prices without having a solid ground for these high prices. That's why those two initiatives of European Commission, with the improvements that we can bring, and also the Council, and then during the trilogues, the final version, are extremely important for the future of the energy and even the climate policy landscape.
Do you get a sense that, you know, after the ugly, horrendous invasion of Ukraine, you saw a moment of solidarity because all the member states were thinking, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And there was a kind of sense of burden sharing, if I can call it that broadest sense, or having to burden share about what we do, because you needed a united front to a certain extent. Do you think that sentiment's still there as we think about what we need to do right now, especially as when we look at what's going to happen, you know, in terms of our temperatures? This winter could be either really cold or really hot. Both will need electricity in various ways, right? And we have to really think about that. Is that still that momentum, still that feeling of coming together?
No, I think it's a clear awareness, at least in ITRE committee, but not only, that we still need a lot of solidarity. Even that the situation is improved, and I think, and here I totally supported the proposals of European Commission. They did an excellent job. Even with the urgency Article 122 measures, of course, we didn't like it as Parliament. We tried to advocate, to remind that should be temporary, that should be only if the urgency is very clear.
Yeah.
But finally, all those measures were really useful. And on one hand, of course, gave us some instruments to be better prepared, to have the necessary reserves for gas, for instance. This was something that we legislated in a record time. On the other hand, I believe that discouraged the aggressor, Russia, to act even more aggressively against European Union. Because if we wouldn't take all those measures, the situation could be even more catastrophic. But you're right. next winter we don't know how it will be. If it will be very cold and with still some shortage on the international gas market. And this winter we do not have all the solutions that we had at the beginning, because we had some, you know well, some additional quantities coming from Norway, from north of Africa, of course energy from United States at premium price, clearly,
Exactly.
but for our security of supply were extremely important, and
Sure.
our strategic partnership with the United States was very important in this, and really saved us. Now the situation could be a little bit different, and if the winter is very cold, and if the much smaller amount of gas that we import from Russia, but still significant, will be interrupted totally and bluntly, then let's see the solidarity, because of course exists, but it was not yet tested in a very, very difficult scenario.
Sure. But I'm hoping that some policymakers and decision makers are really scenario planning for that harsh reality, because it may come about.
Yes, yes. European Commission always warned this about this situation. Member states have plans.
Okay.
The solidarity mechanism is there because it was introduced via the legislation under Article 122. It was not questioned. I'm coming from the country that produces gas, 80% of our necessary. And after UK, after Brexit, maybe you are the second. And the potential is very high, taking into account that Netherlands have potential but not the will to continue producing, or at least expanding the production. With the Black Sea that will start soon, Romania could become a provider for the whole region. But if a catastrophic situation will arise, we are ready to be solidar. It will not be easy in practice.
Precisely, exactly. Okay, we'll come back to that, because I think that's the one that it's a near-term issue. It's going to test us, and given the volatility of what we experienced at the weekend, we don't simply know. That's why scenario planning is important by governments. I'm going to go, Frank, if I can go to you. You've done a lot of work outside of the EU on hydrogen, and we need clean hydrogen as part of the energy mix in Europe. Are there any great examples or lessons you can share from having worked at GIZ outside of the EU that could benefit the growing hydrogen, economy in Europe?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, everyone looks at the EU. So there's no week when not a delegation from outside comes to my office. This week it's Vietnam, so if everyone's interested, Thursday, Friday, to look at EU. And why is that? Because there's no other place where you have such a political regulatory framework that's so complex, but also kind of complete. You have incentive subsidies, you have the political mandates, industry targets. So most of the hydrogen projects worldwide are actually here. There are more hydrogen projects in the US closer to being financed because of the IRA, as we all know, but still we are in a very good place, and everyone's looking here. But as Cristian was nicely saying, well, for the renewable hydrogen, we need renewable energy. We need renewable energy for electrification. So there is a limit, and we won't most probably not be able to produce enough for our needs in 2030, 2035. So strong cooperation with the outside world is absolutely necessary. And I would even call it a symbiotic relationship that we have, mostly with the African continent, basically of geographics, and a lot of partnerships are already ongoing. And I mean, you all heard at last COP, the EU signing agreements with Kazakhstan and Namibia. We have Algeria and Italy, Belgium and Oman, Germany and India, and there's so many more. And lots of investments going on. And so we'll see all of that. But what I thought I'd talk more about is I think there's in our discussion a little bit of a notion that the oil and gas that we currently have is being replaced by hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, and what have you. But I don't know if that's the case. There's some think tanks running around and saying, well, 10% of the oil molecules will actually be replaced. The rest is being an economic transformation. So what do they mean? Instead of hydrogen being imported to Europe, products will be imported with the hydrogen produced at state. Steel, okay? So currently we get iron ore from Mauritania, Brazil, South Africa, heaps of stones, basically, to produce the first step of the value chain, which is sponge iron, which are small pellets. So in a scenario where you import the iron ore and the energy in the form of ammonia, say, to Europe, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. So you rather produce the iron ore in Brazil or South Africa and bring that with one ship instead of 10 or what. And the same you do for the chemical industry, for granulates and plastics and waxes and the basis for colors and what have you, for all of those products that we have. So the question is that bad for Europe? So you could argue, yeah, well, it's bad. And Cristian was saying that, well, the industry is escaping. They go where the energy is cheapest. But you could also argue, if we get rid of the super energy intensive part of the production, that also is very low on value addition, like my sponge iron thing, but keep the rest in Europe, then the high kind of the steel making and the production of the Mercedeses and the wind turbines and so on, maybe it's a good deal. Maybe also for our population decline, if we have less people in the future, use the people that we have for the highly skilled jobs and leave the other things for the outside. So maybe that's not even a choice. It will happen regardless, because if you talk to Brazilians and South Africans, they're saying, yeah, well, we do ammonia and all of this, but what we are really interested in is higher up on the industrial scale. Would be interested what session 2 is saying to that.
Okay, but so, I mean, therefore, when you sum that up, what's the kind of the main lesson, therefore, is about making sure that our supply chains are, we're clear about them, and the fact that we're being forensic about whether we are greenwashing, and are we being clear about what we're actually bringing into the marketplace? What is the key lesson for you?
The key lesson is, A, we need to know that this is most likely to come.
Okay.
So we need very good and reliable partners worldwide, and we need many relationships, and not only a few where we import all those products. And we need very robust systems that we actually clear of the carbon content of the products that we are importing. And for this, I mean, there are very intelligent people and very intelligent systems like blockchain technology and where you can have reliable certificates that really tell you. But yeah, we need to test it in the market, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm gonna go straight on, because I'm conscious of the fact that last time I really ran over. So I'm going to make sure all the speakers get to the bat, and then we'll come into a conversation. So I'm going to go directly to you, Anita, without a break. Thank you for being with us. It's good to see you. You know, they're here because, Anita's here because of Vodafone. And it's really good to have that perspective built into this conversation. We've worked together on the Connected Europe. We had a Connected Europe initiative where we clearly declared there was a need for a digital and a green transition, a twin transition, and to be thinking about the role of digitalization in that. So share with us your thinking about the role a company like Vodafone can play in the transformation that needs to take place, but also how you can help think about the market in Europe in terms of telecom, which we need. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for explaining for the audience what Vodafone is doing on an energy panel, because you may have wondered. And thank you for bringing back the term of twin transition into the discussion, because we are really talking about the twin transition here, green and digital together. And interestingly enough, on a personal note, I am an energy industry veteran. I worked in the energy industry for 20 years. I used to be also energy ambassador, so it's really a homecoming for me. And I'm extremely proud that I represent Vodafone, a company which really means it. So when we are talking about green energy and transition, I would say that our commitment is around 3 pillars. First, net zero, second, circularity, and third, enabler. When it comes to net zero, just give you one data point. We are now, via our fixed and mobile network, are transmitting 10 times as much data as 5 years ago, and even though our power consumption remained relatively flat. And we committed to have renewable energy, powered energy in our network by 2025 across the globe. We already reached that in 2021 for Europe. And when it comes to net zero, for scope 1 and 2 emissions, we aim to be there by 2030, and for scope 3 by 2040. So on circularity, let me just cite you one of our commitments that by 2025, we are using, recycling, or reselling 100% of our network waste. And we are already at 96% in 23, so it's quite remarkable. And we, of course, have quite many products when it comes to also devices and recycling devices, as well as renewing the life cycle of devices. But the real interesting for our discussion is our commitment to be an enabler.
Yes.
And we committed to decrease our customers' emission by 350 million tons by 2030. And just to give you a comparative number, only in 22, we already managed to decrease the customers' emission with 24.9, so 25 million tons, which is over 26 times more than the emission of our entire operation. So here comes in what a network, a telecom company, what Vodafone can do for the digital and green transition as an enabler. We introduced a new architecture called Open RAN, which is aiming for densely populated areas with various different architectures, which is 25-35% more energy efficient than any other solution on the market. But to bring examples closer to the energy sector, we work with E.ON and over 20 million consumers, where we brought smart meters across Europe, which obviously decreases the demand of those households, businesses which are using it. But we also have a smart tire solution, an IoT-backed tire solution with Continental, which decreases the fuel consumption of cars by about 1,000 liters per year, as well as increases road safety. And of course, the smart lighting solutions are also known, which can create 50% decrease of electricity consumption, as well as the smart building solutions, which are also creating good double-digit decreases in demand. But we, I think, many times also focus on demand reduction, and I would like to highlight one solution of ours, which works on the supply side. And that's a digital asset broker, where you can integrate for any source of energy, for example, an electric vehicle battery, into the system, which during peak times offers electricity. So the system grid can extract electricity from the battery, and then it's recharged off peak times. So digital solutions, connectivity, IoT, and data together used smartly can enhance the supply of energy, can create serious energy efficiency measures, and can, of course, decrease the demand. For that, you need a well-integrated system across Europe. So I'm very happy to see also European Commission representative here. And our main message or ask would be that to be sustainable in this transition, you need to endorse and enhance not only the energy companies, but together also the telecommunication companies. Because the digital solutions and the telecommunication companies' network and data are essential to optimize our energy use and to create the most efficient energy usage what we can achieve. Thank you.
Anita, thank you. I'm so glad you were able to make it and bring that entry point into digitalization, because we've been missing that conversation up to now, right? And you've done it really well. But you sound too good to be true. You do. Come on. I mean, it's like holistic. It's great. Bang, bang, bang. What? I mean, and I know that you as a company have wanted to make sure you can be an enabler, right? And the facts are for themselves. You're not making it up. Just it's there. It is happening. What I want to know is that, what do you see as you've been gentle. What do you need from the European market and the European Commission when we think of next year, right? Is it about better competition? Is it about greater access, market? Because if you are, let's say, a model company in terms of approach, You're still going to want to make profit. Absolutely, we know that. But you're doing things in a good way. But what do you want? What do you want from the Commission or the marketplace in Europe as Vodafone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are very well read. You are reading the papers. And of course, the picture I wanted to highlight and show is, of course, looks very rosy, and it shows all the various solutions we can bring to the table. But I would jump here on what Cristian said, because you talked about the competitiveness of our industry, and then it was also picked up by the speaker before me. And to enhance the competitiveness of the European industry, we already heard 2 points of view, so I will insert a third into the discussion. We believe in Vodafone that it's really the 5G which can make the difference, and in that we are dramatically lagging behind China and US. In the 5G build right, it's about 20% across Europe for 5G build right, and the same equivalent number is about 70% in China and 80% in the US. So if you think of the future technologies, if you think of optimization for industry, how would we bring back competitiveness to Europe, how we keep the industry in Europe, then 5G is absolutely essential and needed. And you asked also about why is that? And we strongly believe the reason is that the market is literally very fragmented. We are about 97 operators in Europe, while the equivalent number in Asia and in US is 8 to 10, and that's pretty much what the market size can handle. So we are looking forward to work with the current as well as the next European Commission to create a healthy and sustainable infrastructure where we can also invest and scale. So every solution which I discussed is working beautifully, but if you want to scale really, and you don't only want use cases here and there and examples, but you want to scale at all European level, then we need to reinvest and invest into the network, that it remains resilient and reliable, and that will need a brand new framework for the whole industry.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's it from them. You've all been very patient, diligently listening. Reactions? Please, sir. And before anyone picks up the mic, I'm just going to see if I can get 2 or 3 before we get back to the panel. Please, introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Marc Defren. I'm representing here an alliance of European NGOs, which is basically promoting a very low carbon energy mix with an important contribution of nuclear energy. So I was a bit shocked, I must say, by the statement of the Director-General at the beginning, saying that renewables is security of supply. That, frankly, I do not understand. Renewables are intermittent, at least the one we are mentioning here, the wind and solar energy. So by definition, they cannot be security of supply. They need to be held by other means, be it storage, be it gas, as it was mentioned, or be it hydrogen or whatever other means, to become, in a way, participating to the security of supply. In addition to that, renewables are also basically not economic. We heard during the first presentation, the first panel today, by the lady from the European Bank, saying, yeah, 20 years ago, there were a lot of doubts about investing in renewables, in the wind and the solar, but now it's going on. Well, it's going on, maybe, but maybe not. If you go to the Court of Auditor and you look to the subsidies, even last year, now on a yearly basis, the subsidies for renewables, it's 100 billion euros per year in the European Union. And this even does not count all the additional investments which are necessary to make it work if you want to have it security of supply, which means the storage issue, the adaptation to the grid, we mentioned about it, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So the way to renewables, I don't say that we don't need to do it, but the way to renewables is not the cheapest way to go for it if you take the full cost into account. Okay. And you have to look to the OECD studies on these issues.
Sure, but what's your point, sir?
The point is, when you look to nuclear, it's decarbonized, it's economic, and it is reliable. So the question to the Commission, we talk about transforming the energy and climate policy landscape. Is it not the time for the Commission to basically, as the organization, institutions, which is basically making the proposals, to again put nuclear much, much higher into the agenda of basically all the European documents and the strategies and the implementation documents compared to what we have seen over the last 20 years. And a very first example of that would be for the Commission to make a new illustrative nuclear program of the community. The last one is dating from 2017. It's really not anymore something to be used as a basis, as it is still the case.
Okay.
And it's important also, coming to the previous panel, it's also important, I think, to have that move forward for the EU, for the future of the EU. We're talking about the risk of the EU.
But what you're I suppose, not dealing with is by your proposition, you're going to put the two largest economies on a head collision, France and Germany, on that issue. But that's for them. That's for the panel to discuss, not for me. We're a think tank. We can just pose what the scenario is going to be. Come on, anybody else who wants to ask a question or a reaction to what you've heard so far? I can see that most of you are not looking me in the eye because you know I'm going to pick on you. So don't worry, don't worry. Any particular? Okay, I'm not going to. I was going to say flog a dead horse, but that's a terrible thing to say about an audience, isn't it? I didn't mean it in that way. So let me come to you, Pierre, in terms of responding directly to that issue. And Claire, I'd really welcome your thoughts on it as well. But no, first for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, of course, I didn't mean to say that only renewables are security of supply. I think you're mischievously distorting a bit what I've said. What I meant to say is that they contribute to security of supply, and that I think I stand by, and I have no problems in saying. Now, of course, they need to be seen in a general context, and of course, there needs to be the stability and the stability of electricity production. One can talk about subsidies. Huh? There are fossil fuel subsidies as well in Europe, and they're quite high, and actually many will argue they far exceed the renewable subsidies. And then, of course, I think we have a situation where in all our modeling that we have towards 2030, but also towards 2050 and climate neutrality, nuclear plays a role. Already back in 2017, absolutely. I can show you the models. Already in 2017, when the Commission presented its climate neutrality plan, it had renewables as a main source of electricity production, complemented by nuclear. That's the same thing with the different modeling that we've done before. We are starting the modeling exercise for 2040, so a step between 2030 and 2050, and there as well, there is a role for nuclear. We have never claimed that nuclear would disappear. What we have claimed, and I think that is a common and a well-known fact to you, that it has to be the decision of a member state, whether it has nuclear or not. And we are now in a situation where there is a large group of member states that has nuclear, and there is indeed a group that has no intention or is strongly opposed to it. What we've seen since the crisis, I think, is that there's been a shift in the debate on nuclear. Many people thought that the energy crisis would lead to a shift on the debate of coal. That has not been the case. Coal usage has not increased, but it is obvious that in a handful of member states, there has been a development in the policy on nuclear. Now, that will, of course, be taken into account when we then prepare how we see the different steps, 2040, 2050, and translating that into the modeling scenarios. It is a bit too early to say exactly to the extent to which it will have an impact, because, for instance, there's a change in policy in Sweden, for instance, but there's no investment decision yet as such. So, of course, you have to base yourself on a bit more concrete decisions before you take that into account in the modeling. But it is obvious that there is, as I said, a handful of member states where you've seen a real evolution in the debate on the nuclear since the crisis. That will be taken into account in how we then, when we do the different scenario exercises and modeling exercises. But already back in 2017, it is absolutely clear that within the 2050 perspective, in the impact assessment that underpinned the climate neutrality goal, there was a role for nuclear there as well.
There.
Yes, thank you. As a compliment, I would start by saying one thing. We can't afford to oppose the energies. And I think that we have to have it in mind. We are in a situation where, together with, as we discussed, energy efficiency and sobriety, we will have electrification of a number of uses. We will be short electrons in Europe, short green electrons or short low-carbon electrons in Europe, if, even if we push on all the levers. So, I mean, I was a bit struck by this intervention saying, well, trying to oppose again energies. Let's go back to facts. First, and here we need to be humble and pragmatic. When we look at energy prices, the relative prices have evolved dramatically in the last few years. We've seen, indeed, the prices of renewables, electric renewables, dropping. That's quite dramatic. The price of PV has been almost divided by 10, the price of wind minus 70%. At the same time, we haven't seen the same evolution on nuclear, and also for good reasons. Nuclear safety, Fukushima learnings, and so on and so forth. So we are now at a stage where the price of renewables, the most economic way to decarbonize is renewables. It may change. It is, well, we've looked at it carefully, and that's also the assessment of the Commission. And as you said, we are producing renewables, we are producing nuclear. So in a way, we have skins in all games, okay? Yeah. At this stage, renewables are the most economic way to produce electricity. And and talking about subsidies, when you look at a country like France, and we've looked at it carefully again, indeed, renewables have been super subsidized at the beginning, and then their prices have decreased. And in times of energy crisis, the availability of renewables has made it possible to reimburse the amount of subsidies that they had received. And that's a bit more than 30 billion euros. So we're not, so let's be careful here not to give false ideas. They haven't cost, when you look at a country like France, at least, they have cost a lot over the years. They have now reimbursed what they've cost. I think that's a striking fact. So at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not saying we need only one or we need only the other, but let's all be very responsible. Let's avoid false arguments and let's act responsibly. I mean, new nuclear capacities, if they are built today, will take 15 years to go online. So all the arguments that go against the development of renewables are simply shooting into our feet on the path to decarbonation.
Well said, Kat. Thank you very much. Cristian.
Yes, just a short comment. Of course, I totally agree with Claire that we should not oppose between different solutions to decarbonize. This is clear, and I strongly advocate that. And I need also to defend a little bit European Commission, because I'm a supporter of nuclear, not because I'm coming.
Good for you, Cristian. It's not usually
not
the case.
Because I'm coming, only because I'm coming from Romania, and I understand, and I fully support also the Romanian government. Actually, is almost a unanimity of all political forces to develop reactor number 3 and 4, and we are the first country starting to look to the modular reactors. That could maybe change the mind of some countries if this technology is proven, but also because I believe that we need to have continuity, and it was well explained. And CCGT, of course, it's a solution, but for some countries, nuclear is a solution. But it's also true that to build new capacities is not cheap at all. It is very expensive to get rid of what you have and to close. Then it is difficult to understand that, but I cannot criticize. But for new capacities, of course, I also believe that investing massively and supporting massively the renewables is the only solution that we have. For some countries, of course, if they decide for security reason, for continuity of supply reason, to continue to invest in nuclear, I also think that is a very wise decision. Why I try to defend the European Commission, even that maybe on taxonomy, even on Net Zero Industry Act, they could be a little bit more clear showing the support for nuclear. But they should look also to the political landscape in Parliament and in the Council. And here, I have to admit that we didn't succeed always to have a majority in order to support the nuclear energy. there is not an opposition like is an opposition against fossil fuels, also wrong in case of gas as a transition, and also against CCS, now a little bit less opposition, and I welcome also European Commission that CCS is mentioned in Net Zero Industry Act, but there is not a strong support in the Parliament, and the Council is very much divided. So European Commission, looking to the political landscape, cannot act differently. So here, to be fair, first, let's try to change the decision or the support in the Parliament and in the Council, and then you'll see European Commission more enthusiastic in admitting that nuclear energy is a solution.
Great. We have a questionnaire at the back. Oh, and here. That's 3 men, though. Can we, some of the women, please, put your hands up too, if you can. Go on, sir.
Michael Nees from ECOS, the Environmental Coalition.
Just hold the mic further.
Michael Nees from ECOS, the Environmental Coalition on Standards. I work on buildings or the built environment primarily. Biggest energy consumer, biggest gas consumer as well. Where a lot of us felt the energy crisis, which gas was at the heart of. And I want to pose a question in terms of when do we cut the links between homes and gas? Because hydrogen does not make sense for heating homes. We need it in other areas. So regardless of what you say about a decarbonization of the gas mix, that's not a route to decarbonizing buildings. Otherwise, you know, if we continue to allow buildings to be heated in that way and continue to allow the purchase and installation of gas boilers, we'll just continue the EU's addiction to gas. And it's the largest gas market in the world, I believe, by value, which the energy companies want to keep hold of. So we can't give the false impression that the situation in industry is the same for our homes.
Yeah.
So we need to decouple those two. So when do we get out of gas in terms of our buildings?
What do you think we should do, though, for the home? What's the solution for homes?
For homes, obviously, we need to transition their supply to renewables, as been repeated a lot of times. We need to look at the efficiency and the efficiency requirements in eco-design, so allowing what's available on the market over time, because hydrogen will never make sense in terms of energy efficiency. Economically, it will become very expensive. The energy is needed elsewhere. And then we have the Buildings Directive, which has those long-term goals of making buildings zero emissions.
Yeah.
So energy efficiency of the actual building itself to cut demand. So there's a big mix of things, but gas and a blended hydrogen mix of whatever will never make sense. So
yeah, but for homes in the future, you need some certainty. Otherwise, you know, people are just going to go crazy. But thank you for the question. Gentleman here. Then I need to wrap up.
Thank you.
Do introduce yourself.
So, Eric Fer, I'm a member of the Environmentalists for Nuclear Energy. But above all, I'm a citizen who cares, who worry about the way the transition is made. I hear that photovoltaic is the cheapest way to produce electricity. But if you speak to people in the street, they all know that they do not provide electricity to switch on the light when you need it, and to heat the house in winter. So it might be cheap when the sun is there, but the system to provide electricity when you really need it costs a lot. So if you say that electricity from renewable is cheap, that's a kind of line. And this morning, that there was a question about trust of the people in Europe.
Yeah.
And if you keep saying stuff like that, it won't work.
So you want a bit more honesty, clearly. But what's your solution? What would you like to see happen?
Well,
from a citizen point of view.
The Green Deal has put forward photovoltaic, wind turbine, a bit of green hydrogen, but they put apart nuclear, which is a very good way to decarbonize electricity. And I don't understand why it has been like that.
All right, great. That's it, I'm afraid, sir, because I need to wrap up. But so if I can start with you again, Pierre, or actually, Claire, do you want to go first, and then we can?
Yeah, I can say two things.
Yeah.
First, cost of energy and cost of electricity. It's key. We agree. and I didn't say renewables are cheap, I say they are the cheapest, which is, and by the way, if a minute of publicity to say that we have made a study on how to decarbonize Europe, cost optimizing and making sure supply and demand are met. It's very transparent, it's public, so anyone interested, please have a look. That's one, because indeed we need honesty and we need data and we need transparency. Second, responding to the point on homes. First, well, gas is used indeed for heating purposes, not just. Gas is also used in industry, gas is also used in electricity production. If I turn to decarbonation of home, I would strongly agree that the first thing we need is energy efficiency and sobriety. That's a given. I mean, we need more efficient home. We need them to be eco-conceived. We need, and we know, by the way, that this is going to be much easier for new houses rather than for old houses. Yeah. And I think all the member states have tried for years to renovate and to speed up renovation in their countries. I've been part of it in my previous slide. It's not easy. It has to be done. It's an essential part of the way forward. Then what do we need in terms of mix? Well, my point here is let's be careful. Electricity cannot do everything. One, because in collective buildings there are limits to what you can do, technically speaking. And second, because we have a limited capacity. And as I was saying, especially as long as you have houses which are not renovated, you're going to have strong peak demand of heating in wintertime. So this is why you need to be super careful about the transition. And what you have to have in mind is that when you replace an old boiler by a new boiler, you gain 30%. If that's just new technology, minus 30% in terms of savings. When you and then the other way forward is, of course, to replace old boilers by heat pumps. And here you can replace them either by electric heat pumps, 100%, but when it gets very cold, their performance decreases and they still contribute to the peak demand, or hybrid heat pumps. What is it? It runs on electricity at least 70%, 70 of the time, and it can run on gas when it's very cold. So that gives you the advantage of being electric most of the time when you need it, but when it's very cold, not increasing the peak demand. So you need, here again, you need a pragmatic approach. And you have to be careful not, that's a general rule, I think, in energy. Let's not be overly dogmatic. Let's look at the constraints and let's look at the pragmatic way to achieve it.
Okay, you really need to enter the life of politics, you know. We need more people like you in politics, really. It's great, good for you. I need to wrap up, but Pierre, I think I can't wrap up without you commenting on what we, you know, the two questions that we had.
Well, I don't think I need to add much to.
I know she's done it. She's done the job, right?
No, I mean, you know the work that we're doing on the buildings directive, notably. It's obvious that the renovation levels at the moment are not at all where we should be. We are actually quite far from where they should be. There is progress, but it's certainly not where at a level that would put us on track, right, for the different targets. I think this is going to be one of the major issues in the coming years, and it's difficult. As Claire said also, you hinted at that, the whole financial construction of the support schemes and so forth is very complex. There are good examples in some member states, but generally speaking, there are still many bottlenecks to address. And coming back to a gentleman here on the second row, I mean, nobody I think at this table has argued that the electricity production would be composed of one source of energy. Of course we need stability in the system, and that would mean that we have variable sources and stable sources of electricity production, and come also other solutions that of course we need to develop far more, like storage and flexibility of the system. And I think that's an agreement, and of course then there are points of view on where you put the emphasis, but I don't think there's any serious actor in the energy debate that says it's only variable. It's not variable in any form whatsoever. So I think there is. I think it's very much our policy. And as I said, we fully respect the fact that on an issue like nuclear, you have to leave it to a member state to determine, to decide whether it wants it. And that is, and anything else would be a big mistake.
Indeed, also a political hot potato. As you know, it'll combust. Thank you, panelists. It's great. As you know, part of our brand is to make sure we bring you a multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary approach. So you have public, private, foundation, etc. Just so we can shake down the issues effectively. Thank you for contributing to that. Thank you all very much.